with your presentation. Then Barcelona, Spain. Wow.
Awesome.
Illinois.
Wonderful.
France. Hamburg. Got quite a group here. I mean, Fons is quite a group. Bloomington, Indiana. Snowy, Michigan.
Snowy, Michigan. Hi, Emily. Brazil.
Got people from everywhere. Brazil.
Actually, since we're kind of doing this, if you wouldn't mind, everyone kind of putting in the chat where you are currently, I think that would be very meaningful. Something we can take a look at. We have Victoria, Canada, Chicago, Illinois.
And because of the size of the group, if they can all put their microphones on mute to start.
Oh, yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to get some interference there. And
Bowling Green,
Kentucky.
Kentucky.
They have to just click it off when they want to talk.
Okay. Bowling Green, Kentucky. The Netherlands.
Hi, Maureen. How are you?
Saline, Michigan. Switzerland.
What a group. Hi, Maureen.
Hi there, Jerry.
How you doing? You been all right?
Oh, I'm struggling, but I'm doing okay.
Good, good. Tell Bob he's welcome to sit in and listen if he wants.
Okay.
Okay.
Texas, another one from the Netherlands. Buffalo, New York. Dublin, Ireland. Maureen, are you in California?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Paris, France.
From Switzerland.
Switzerland. Yes. Yay.
Hello.
No.
Almost time.
Hello.
Buffalo, New York.
Why don't you go ahead and hit the recording in a minute, just so we don't forget. I'm very paranoid about that.
I did, Jerry. I did.
Right.
Paul is Dr. Barker's proud student. He's from the Democratic Republic of Congo originally. Joe is near the moon right now. That's wonderful. From Ghana.
Yep.
I saw someone else from Ghana as well.
Yep.
We'll just get started in just a few minutes, but I want to welcome everybody. And if you could mute yourself, that would be great. We do want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, hopefully later on. But if you mute yourself, that helps with the background noise. But we would love to see your bright and shiny faces. So if you feel comfortable with that, I think it helps bring us together more. So, Indiana University, Erica Kovacs student. I saw we had a lot of folks from Indiana University sign up, so that's just awesome. Mainz, Germany. Switzerland, another Michigan. I'm just so amazed at how we can all come together from all over the world and be able to communicate like this. It's just, I don't know, it gets me excited every time. Buenos Aires, Rome, Italy.
Wow.
Yeah, you got quite a group, Fons.
Yeah.
They all came to see you.
No. I'm so happy in San Francisco.
Right. Okay.
Before we get started, if maybe you could just share your perspective you bring today. Are you a CEO? Are you a student? Are you a scholar? Are you a practitioner, HR leader, etc.? If you could share that with us, that would be great. Mexico. We have someone from Mexico living in Chile.
Okay, I've got 12 o'clock.
Yay, South America. All right, we have practitioners. We have an international educator, PhD student, trainer and facilitator student, organizational psychologist. Oh my goodness, they're just going through. Trainer, coach, mediator, scholar, practitioner.
I've got 12.
Okay.
Okay.
Law enforcement, professor, CEO, account manager, and student facilitator. Wow, welcome everyone. Thank you. It's always nice to know who the audience is and kind of what your focus is. Nonprofit, focused on cultural integration. Crepin is just a curious guy. So I think that's a good thing to be. So welcome to this talk. My name is Kimberly Barker, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar on cultural values, national responses, and the coronavirus with Drs. Fons, Trompenaars, and Jerry Glover. If you could post any questions that you have in the chat box, that would be helpful. Oh, Vivian from Malta. That would be great. You may have an opportunity at the end to ask questions, but we want to be able to ask as many questions as possible. So if you could place them in the chat. If you are watching this on a replay, if you could hit the subscribe button, that would be wonderful. I'd like to introduce you to two of my favorite scholars and people on the planet. Drs. Fons Trompenaars and Dr. Jerry Glover. Fons Trompenaars studied economics at the Free University of Amsterdam and later earned a PhD from Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, with a dissertation on differences and conceptions of organizational structure in various cultures. He experienced cultural differences firsthand at home, where he grew up speaking both French and Dutch, and then later at work with Shell in 9 countries. Fons Trompenaars is known all over the world for his work as a consultant, trainer, motivational speaker, and author of many books on the subject of culture and business. He has spent over 25 years helping Fortune 500 leaders and professionals manage and solve their business and culture dilemmas to increase global effectiveness and performance, particularly in the areas of globalization, mergers and acquisitions, HR, and leadership development. Fons wrote Riding the Waves of Culture, Understanding Cultural Diversity in Business. This book sold over 120,000 copies and was translated into French, German, Dutch, Korean, Danish, Turkish, Chinese, Hungarian, and Portuguese. He is co-author of 7 Cultures of Capitalism, Building Cross-Cultural Competence and 21 Leaders for the 21st Century with Charles Hampton Turner. Recently, he published Riding the Whirlwind, a dynamic new take on creativity and innovation. Fons has co-authored an article with Peter Williams entitled Lost in Translation regarding culture and failure, which was published in the online issue of Harvard Business Review. Dr. Jerry Glover is a cultural anthropologist who has worked in consulting, research, and education projects around the globe. He is currently an associate of Trompenaars Hampton Turner, consulting on client projects in transcultural competence and e-learning development. Dr. Glover is an emeritus board member of the International Society for Organization Development and Change and a peer review editor for the Organization Development Journal. He was a faculty member of the graduate program in organizational change at Hawaii Pacific University for 27 years. He earned his doctoral degree in cultural anthropology from the University of Florida. Dr. Glover's professional career includes working as a consultant on over 150 change and development initiatives, including corporations, governments, and professional applications such as education, healthcare, military, tourism, and training in locations such as Fiji, New Zealand, Hawaii, the Bahamas, Europe, and North America. He has conducted extensive research on organizational culture, culture change, and cultural dilemmas and socio-cultural encounters. Dr. Glover has numerous publications in the field of change, leadership, and culture, and he even passed me in a couple of graduate classes. So, as we begin today, can you tell us, gentlemen, why this topic of cultural values, national responses, and the coronavirus is so necessary today.
Jerry.
Fons, if you want to start out, that would be wonderful.
Sure. No, you know, it was interesting to see how different nations, cultures reacted on the crisis in many ways. And now in finding remedies. And in a way, it's beautiful if we have leaders who combine these different learnings, experiments, if you like, because nobody knows where it's going. And I think that Sweden takes freedom, while China started with perhaps a little late a lockdown. These are all different approaches. And we were very interested, Jerry and I, and you, Kim, in what are these cultural attitudes that make you look at the crisis differently in a variety of ways. And that's why we developed an app to measure that. And that's why we are trying to build up some conceptual ideas in dealing with the crisis in a more effective way. Because if you just leave it to medical people, with all due respect, by the way, you are missing some angles. And I think the anthropological, the cultural approach could be helpful because we can learn faster.
Fons, I will defer to you, and I'll come back later and mention my things because we're already 6 minutes in. So go ahead.
Fine.
We know Jerry is very sequential, right? In his
Very good. Now let's build on that, Kim, if you allow, and try to have a, I would say 30-minute type of presentation that I would like to share.
Okay.
And it's, by the way, a presentation that we will make sure you get a copy of if you like. And as I often say, even if you don't like it, you get it. First of all, what we call the COVID-19 agility. Are we ready for a crisis like this? And it's interesting, especially now in a stage where we're already discussing getting out of the lockdowns and lock up and getting into environments where we can work again. It will create other tensions and challenges that we would like to look into. What we have found, however, is that if you listen to the leaders of the world, from Trump to our Prime Minister Rutte, we have a lot of interesting speakers on the topic. And what you hear is that they all see the same dilemmas, but that the approach to the dilemmas are quite different. Let me give you a simple example. Our Prime Minister 2 days ago, he says, I want to re-emphasize that number one problem is health. Number two problem is health. Number three problem is health. And number four is the economy. Now, if I paraphrase Trump, number one is the economy. Number two is the economy. Number three is the economy. What was four? Oh, yes, health. And for them, I am sure the dilemma, and this is a meta-dilemma of health versus the economy, is the same. But the approach, the preference is quite different. And we have looked at 7 meta-dilemmas according to our model and find that cultures have approached it quite differently. And we should learn from it because some cultures did it better than others. It's difficult to measure, but Jerry will talk about that because what are the statistics worth? There are a lot of caveats we have to be careful with. But the main point I want to make is that there is a possibility of going to a deeper level. And that's why we developed an app. By the way, it's a free app, which is very painful for Dutch people to say. And at the end, I will give you a link where you can download the app. We're writing blogs around the app to give you the results and the conceptual background. And please try to spread this app to others because the more data we gather, the more interesting things could be revealed. Now, dilemmas like we want to comply with regulations and we need to be faster and flexible because it's a crisis. These are dilemmas. There's nothing wrong with one and nothing wrong with the other, but it's a challenge. Now, I don't want to quote them all because we'll get into that in more detail. Face-to-face versus digital. One is not better than the other, but you need both. We need to go back to work in the office, and at the same time, we need to assure our staff that they should not be afraid. It's a dilemma, by the way, that we got through interviews with our clients. And what I would like to mention with you is that these dilemmas are, again, very human, shared throughout the world, but some want to start with face-to-face to go digital. Others say, I want to go digital to deepen the face-to-face. Now, what we in dilemma thinking follow often is what Einstein once told us, that you can't solve a problem at the same level it was created. And dilemma thinking, and especially the reconciliation process, is to achieve that higher level. And there are 4 popular entry points: innovation, sustainability, globalization, and leadership. And let me connect those 4 entry points within one sentence. Globalization leads to different viewpoints, or which it's the essential role of a leader to connect, which is another word for innovation that leads to sustainable results. And that all has to do with how do we combine opposites. Now, have a look at this picture, and we see that what is hindering us, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that most of our models are a combination of culture bias and bipolarity. Culture bias is you can almost smell the passport of the author if you look at leadership literature. If it's a Chinese leader, you get other messages than an American writer and a French writer. Bipolarity, including cultural models, are you German, a rectangle, or are you Italian, an ellipse? And what Einstein would say, never forget that these are the shadows of a cylinder. And it depends on how you shed the light to make it a square or to make it an ellipse. And that is dilemma thinking, which is symbolized by a spiral. How can we combine opposites? And then suddenly you see that the synthesis includes the thesis and the antithesis. Now, this is all conceptual. I would like to gradually make it more concrete. A wonderful definition of my great friend, Charles Hamden Turner, is that innovation is to combine values that are not easily joined, therefore scarce, therefore profitable. So if you take Apple, what has Apple combined in values that make them so successful and innovative? Now, on a high level, that's called aesthetics and functionality. And they've combined it, while normally they are separated. Everything that is beautiful at an Apple has a function. Everything that is functional is made beautiful. And if you take a lot of companies, they're either functional or they're beautiful, but very often they don't go together. If you take the Formula One, the racing, the speed racing, the big dilemma is speed and safety. Now, every engineer in Formula One will say, how can I use the speed to make the car more safe? And aerodynamics is a way to do it. You use the speed to make the car more safe. Now, leaders, first of all, distinguish a problem from a dilemma, because not everything is a dilemma. Sometimes you have to make choices, which is a stupid thing to do in a dilemma. And once it's a dilemma, they help their teams to reconcile them. Now, let me give you a 4-step approach. We help you in recognizing the cultural differences where these different values come from, by the way, and apply it to Corona. Then the second step is to respect both ends, which makes it into a dilemma that we need to reconcile. And then what as a leader can I do to realize this? Now that is the basic model that we build on. And culture, the source of all these different values that you need to recognize, is a way to approaching problems that come to us as dilemmas. As Charles is saying, dilemmas are human, but it's our culture that defines how we approach those dilemmas in three main areas: the way we deal with humans in their relationships, time, and nature. My seven dimensional model, where you see 5 areas in human relationships, time, and nature. Let us give you the last general input, and I very often use it for those who don't know our work to make clear what we mean with dilemmas. We have asked 140,000 people to react on 2 questions related to this question and or to this case. And the case is the following. You're riding in a car driven by a close friend of yours. Your friend is speeding, going 50 miles an hour where you're allowed to go 30, and he hits a pedestrian. You come to court and the lawyer of your friend says, don't worry, you're the only witness. 2 questions. What is the right of your friend to expect you to go for the lower figure, to lie? My friend has a definite right, some right, no right. Second question is, would you lie, yes or no? Now, we have asked this question to many people everywhere, and I've never had a participant that said, that's a nice situation to be in. Now, and then I ask in Nigeria, in the Netherlands, in America, in Japan, why don't you think this is an easy situation? They all say it in their own words, but they say this is a dilemma. There's nobody in the world that doesn't want to help friends. And at the same time, there is nobody in the world that doesn't want to tell the truth. And you see that the dilemma is human, but it's our culture that puts one before the other. Now, we call this dilemma universalism versus particularism. And let me give you easier words. A universalistic culture believes in be consistent. There are rules that you need to follow, procedures. There is one best way. They talk about transparency. It makes me laugh. And letter of the law. The particularist would say, no, be flexible, be pragmatic, it depends. They are the people who say, what happened to the pedestrian? Because my answer will depend on the situation. And they are more in the spirit of the law. Now, if you are a good leader, what is better? To be consistent or to be flexible? Now, this is again bipolar thinking. It's asking in Myers-Briggs, if you score 80 on thinking, you score 20 on feeling. What kind of stupid issue is that? A great leader uses their thinking to frame their feelings, and they use their feelings to increase the quality of their thinking. It's all about combining. But if you ask people, what was your answer in the car accident? Have a look. And you see that in the 90s are the Protestants, the Swiss, the Germans, the Americans, Canadians, Danish, Norway. Isn't it interesting? All the Protestants say, my friend has no right or some right, and I would not help. And you go into Argentina, India, Morocco, where they say, yeah, it's my friend, I need to help. Now, what does this mean? Is one better than the other? No, because both don't combine if you give it no choice. We are not better than Myers-Briggs. We give people bipolar scales, so you get a PhD. And then you say, oh, wow, there are big differences. But what we find is you have to combine them. Now, let us translate this generic input now into what are the dilemmas we have found in the corona crisis. And one is we need a standardized approach. We need to go for one vaccine, one approach worldwide, versus, yeah, but our patient is unique. They have unique characteristics. what we do in dilemma reconciliation is we crack the line and then we exaggerate the extremes. So if you only go for a standardized approach, you get one size fits all. If you go to customize, you get the unaffordable customized medicine. The compromise is the untested vaccine. And there are a lot of untested vaccines at the moment, one more hopeful than the other. But what is the reconciliation? The reconciliation that we found just by reading all kinds of journals and what have you, is that we need to learn from best practices. So it's okay to do local things like in Sweden, and it's okay to talk in Europe about one approach. You know the discussions in the US, every state does different things, and the federal government is trying to harmonize some of those things. It's great to do things differently in different states, as long as there is central leadership that combines the best practices in next practices that then is globalized. And that is one of the dilemmas that will be very important to reconcile in the crisis we're having. The business dilemma in this ballpark is we need to comply with regulations. On the other hand, we need to be faster and quicker on our feet because it's a crisis. Now, we believe that following the rules versus adapt quickly to circumstances is a dilemma that different countries, and this is two of the questions in our app, we follow standard rules and procedures versus we respond to particular situations. And lo and behold, the Swiss, the Americans, Germans, and Dutch are in the top right-hand corner. Iran, France, Spain, and Italy are either compromising or low on both. I will wait till we know the real results of what countries have done, but my hypothesis is those cultures who reconcile are better off. And so I hope we learn from this in our approach. Individual versus communitarian is the second of 7. I promise you we will be done in 30 minutes, so I'll go for it. Individual cultures are answering A, how can we improve the quality of life? Give people as much freedom and an opportunity to develop oneself, it will be better for quality of life. Versus the communitarian saying, no, even if it obstructs individual freedom, help your fellows. Look at the differences according to age categories. We see in our 140,000 people that young people are much more individualistic than older people worldwide. And again, all kinds of normal distributions in every culture, that's not my point. But what I've seen in the spring break in America, in Australia, in the Netherlands, that all the youngsters ignored all the rules and infected each other, which perhaps is not a big deal because they're young, but they didn't have the responsibility for the larger community. And it's showing perhaps that they didn't even see a dilemma here, but it's just a comment I wanted to make. Now, have a look at 2 questions from our app. And 1 question, and it were all statements where you say, I do it often or never, and a 5-point scale. And achieve individual accountability at all costs versus collaborate with as many people as possible. Swiss, the Netherlands, Germany, top right-hand corner. Iran, Italy, Spain, bottom left. I don't know where it's ending, but I sense a correlation between success in approach and the degree to which we reconcile this dilemma. Co-opetition is the word for the reconciliation. You individually compete to better cooperate, you cooperate to better compete. Neutral versus affective is what do we do with our emotions? we ask people in my society it's considered unprofessional to express emotions overtly. And you will see that those who agree that it's unprofessional to show, Northern Europe, Sweden, Norway, Finland, much more neutral. You go to Kuwait, Italy, Russia, Spain, very emotional. What has this to do with the COVID-19 crisis? Have a look. If you are neutral, rational, IQ, you follow the scientific insights. But what we have seen in the Netherlands, you are right scientifically, but you don't get it. Because the emotions of the public opinion override you. Let me give you one example. All scientists in the Netherlands said you should keep the schools open because you will create group immunity amongst the young people so that you lock out the older people. The teacher association says, yeah, and what about us? The parents say, yeah, and our children. And what happened? It wasn't done. So if you go emotional, you are wrong, but you get it. Both are not ideal. What we need to do is action taken on new insights. And fortunately enough, I see a lot of societies opening up now and opening up the schools. Sweden took a risk by keeping the schools open, but progressive insight is what we need in EQ versus IQ. You need both. Now, my favorite, and I will introduce that as specific and diffuse, was the work of Kurt Lewin. And why? Because there are many dilemmas related to specific and diffuse in the corona crisis. Kurt Lewin, a German psychologist, went to America in the 30s. He became world famous with his field psychology. And Kurt Lewin wrote some articles about his culture shock in America. He says, Americans are amazing. They're like peaches because they have an enormous accessible flesh, public, and a very small privacy, the nut in the center. We Germans are like coconuts. We have a tough outside and a very soft inside. The American model, he called that the U-type, is showing that for Americans, the refrigerator is public. The car is public. You need my car, take my car. Have you tried this in Germany? Are you kidding? The car is never given to anybody. And furniture, you move, you leave your furniture. Have you tried this in France? It's called antique. The furniture belongs to me. Now, according to Lewin, this leads to a specific relationship. If I relate to you, you relate to me, cut the crap. What is this about? A simple example, when I got my PhD, they called me Dr. Trompenaars in the university. And I did a wonderful, I think, a barbecue in the evening, and suddenly I was Fons. So you're doctor at the university and you're Fons at the barbecue. In Germany, the coconut, you're hair doctor everywhere. You buy a steak at the butcher, you're a hair doctor. You come home and you say, hello, Frau Doctor, where are the little doctors? Everything is doctor, because it's not a label. It's not specific. You are doctor. So initially, there is no relationship. They call you Sie and not du. But in October Munich, this happens. Privacies overlap. You are hair doctor. Your wife is Frau Doctor. Look when the peach meets the coconut, and you see that some cultures are specific. Don't take it privately, versus the coconut where everything is personalized. Now, we measure this by asking people, would you paint the house of the boss if you don't feel like doing it? A specific person would say, he's the boss in the company, not outside. It's a specific relationship. In a diffuse culture, you would say, yeah, it's my boss, I need to help. Have a look. 140,000 people. In the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, 92% would say, dear boss, go to hell. Look at the difference. India, China, 32%. Much more diffuse. Now, I like, for those who love this research, to also see the difficulty with this research. Look at the Japanese score. 64% of the Japanese said we would not paint the house of the boss. So we interviewed the Japanese who said, yeah, we missed our option on the questionnaire. In Japan, we would never wait till the boss asks. And this shows, be careful, that's why we're asking more questions. Now, what has this to do with the Corona crisis? Let me give you two dilemmas. First of all, the dilemma between health, which is diffuse, and the economy, which is specific. If you exaggerate health above all, you get healthy bankruptcy. The effects of only looking at health, lockdown forever, with no economy, is the end result. If you go for the economy without looking at health, you go for shareholder value, people who never share. It is what our Prime Minister said, we first fix the health, otherwise we don't have people left to support the economy. Now, the reconciliation is what is called an intelligent lockdown. I am proud what the Dutch have done. They have a lockdown with as much freedom as possible to keep the economy rolling. Now, hotel, restaurants are out, but the doubtful ones are open, but they ask the people to take the 1.5 meter distance, etc., etc. The intelligent lockdown has also another advantage, is because if you go for a pure lockdown, you don't develop group immunity. So that in China, the risk, suppose the numbers are correct, is that everybody is over the hill, that you get a second wave because there is not a vaccine or group immunity. And I wonder what will happen. The other dilemma I like, but I give it in another picture because it's the first results of our app, is monodisciplinary research, the depth of virology, immunology, all the big medical research versus encouraging all disciplines like I'm trying to do from the anthropological and economical side. Countries who have combined the depth of knowledge with the breadth of knowledge, I think are doing better. The Swiss, the Germans, the Dutch, look at Italy, Spain, Iran, very often not combining the two. Now, again, I want to give insights, and Goudsmit, a Harvard professor, I listened to him, and he said we need much more disciplines looking at the problem of Corona than only listening to virologists. And by the way, he is a virologist. We need economists, we need ethical people, we need all kinds of disciplines. Out of business, we got the following dilemmas. Strategic and tough decisions we need to make, Deborah Tannen rapport, versus we need to treat our staff fairly, rapport, etc. If you go for rapport, you get very tough, but you lose your people. If you go for close rapport, you get gallantry, false gallantry. What we need is to create rapport within which you're tough like a nail. The other dilemma was high tech versus high touch, face-to-face versus digital. What we have found is you need to combine the two in a blended way. So if you are digital, you should ask the question, how can digital help us to get deeper relationships? And if you're on the relationship side, how can our relationship help us to go more digital? We will see in the future that globalization of digitalization will need more analog relationships. And it's up to the organization to find out how to combine the two. Let me give you one example. There is the bank in the Netherlands who has split all their teams in two. One works at home digitally, and the other works in a wonderful environment in the office, more space, but also face to face. And the next week, they reverse the order. So they combine digital with analog. I come to the last three quickly, hopefully not dirtily. What gives people status? Is it based on what you do, your output, or who you are? Have a look. This is about leadership. Do we treat people equally, or do we discriminate them positively? And this last one is also very important in terms of the big, let's say, problems we have seen in Spain and Italy, but also in the US, in New York, where there are not enough IC beds, and you do triage. Who is going to be treated and who is not going to be treated? Do we treat people equally, which leads to the extreme of first come, first served? Or do we say the quality of life and the length of life is decisive if we treat you, and that is called, sorry, you're not under 18, go. Both are not ideal. The compromise is let's do tail or head. Let's roll the dice. The reconciliation, I've seen this in 2 countries now, is where they have a diverse group together of medical specialists, of young people, older people, male, female, all kinds of disciplines, setting up a list of criteria that all agree upon, which should be leading for who is going to the IC and who is not. And I think that's a reconciliation because you get all the opinions in. We come to the last one about leadership in this arena. Do you go for bottom up or for top down? And I think leadership in this crisis is the best, the servant leader, holding the ladder for others to climb. Beautiful American example. There is a company where the leader said, I need 30% less salary expenditure, so I might need to fire 30% of you people, which meant about 120 people. But he said, I don't want to do it. I want to leave it to you 400 subordinates to come up with an idea how nobody needs to be fired. The top of the house gave 40% reduction in their salary, the bottom 10%. At the end, they saved 30% of total salary cost. Everybody was happy and even more motivated than in the beginning. The CEO was praised by the question. That's servant leadership, enabling others to perform better. The last 2 is about time, short-term and long-term. And we asked the question, think about past, present, and future in the shape of circles. Now, have a look, very important in this crisis, also for vaccines and untested vaccines, is the minimal viable product. If you focus for optimization, it takes 3 years on average. This is aim, 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 I forget to shoot. If you go too early, it's shoot, 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 aim. The lean startup learns us that we need the minimal viable product. And I think, by the way, what I read in the literature, vaccines are perhaps not the best hope. The best hope, like in HIV, would be things that help to kill the symptoms, but not the disease. So you go not into crisis and that the immune system takes over. But I'm not a medical doctor, but I read about them. The last one is about how do we treat the environment? Are we a boxer playing our own game? Or do we, like judo, take the energy to our advantage? If we overdo one or the other, we need to deliver short-term results to achieve few casualties. Lockdown and the single individual say, I'll do it myself, I'm free. The opposite is that the authorities take you responsible with what we call controlled interactions. The reconciliation, and I think some societies do it better than others. I'm proud of the Netherlands. Look at the reconciliation. People feeling responsible for social distancing and controlling each other, so that the control comes from society rather than from an anonymous authority. And that's the reconciliation of control versus being controlled. This is my story. What I would like to say, translate by intuition the problem into a dilemma. And if it's a problem, make a choice. If it's a dilemma, try to then reconcile it by what can I do with X to get more of Y? Get it into broader realms like your own little discipline, but go outside of it. Intervene in areas you can control yourself as an individual rather than to point to others, and combine hard and soft processes. And follow the 4 R's. And then I would be very happy. I would love you to fill in our app at the top, thtapps.com Corona, and there is a QR. You will get it with the slides, but otherwise use it now. We love your input because we're very keen that you help us in helping others to solve this damn difficult problem. Thank you so much. I hope I not overrun too much of your time, but faster couldn't be done.
You've given us so much to think about. Jerry, are you gonna pull yours up?
Yeah, we need to stop the screen sharing for Fons so I can get mine up.
Okay.
Here we are.
Okay, let me get mine up.
Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, thank you, Fons.
Mm.
Now, just want to let you know that I'm just going to take a brief amount of time. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I always leave Kim some time. But let me explain the reason for me being interested. When Fons and I talked around a month or so ago about all this, I had the idea that I would look at some of the research and some of the data that are out there. And let me say, first of all, it was not a project that was easy. There are a lot of things that we've got to consider about it. And first of all, remember that I want to tell you, I'm trying to stimulate discussion, not draw conclusions. So all of you purists out there that are looking for a specific responses, must have to wait a while. The data sources we're using are not ideal, but we can see trends in them. Time and process, in other words, when countries entered the whole pandemic situation and are important. I think Fons's ideas about reconciliation are apparent in the data. Due to time considerations, as I said, I'm going to give you a brief summary of what I've seen. Now, I'm not tied up in methodology. That is the idea of being a methods person about the data. So please hold your questions on that till we get some more research. I'm just trying to show you some ideas about what you can glean from what we know already. Now, I've used sources like Google Maps, Johns Hopkins, and the World Meters to find data. So I'll let you look at those yourself. The thing is, the real questions we need to be asking, are there global best practices? How influential are cultural values, and which nations have seemed to handle the crisis best? And that is a sliding scale. Sometimes it looks really good in a country, and then suddenly it changes. So we got to keep that in mind. It's an ongoing process. And how important is the ability to reconcile, which Fons has argued, and I argue as well. And remember that the data are a moving target. There are different cycles. There's variations in reporting, accuracy questions about the data, and policies and practices sometimes in a country change midstream. And the sources about the country sometimes can be value-laden and subjective. And the most important thing is the story of this is still happening, and keep that in mind. Once again, my purpose is to indicate trends, not to draw premature conclusions about what the data says. Okay, first of all, some dilemmas that I noticed in the data about countries and about what's going on. You can see there, I'll leave that to you to look at when you see the recording, but they're important dilemmas that each nation must solve, and their cultural values and circumstances have a lot to do with it. Just to show you some things I found, one thing that I thought was quite important is if you look here, I have some countries, the deaths per million and the tests per million, as well as the cases per million. Excuse me. But if you can see the comparison, it appears on the surface with this data in terms of deaths per million and cases per million that the Asian groups have done much better in responding, or for some reason they have a higher, the European countries have a much higher number of deaths per million and cases per million. So if you look at that, that's all it tells us right now.
Jerry,
yeah.
there is a comment. If you could put it on slideshow presentation, so it gets a bit bigger on the screen. No, a button to the two
Sorry.
more to the right. Yeah,
Yep,
there. Yeah,
got it.
here we go.
Can you see that now? I had it on the other so I can switch back and forth with it.
Thank you for the question, by the way.
Sure. You will see it when we send you the recording. So, and I'll be glad to send anyone the information. But you can see here what I thought were the most important things coming from the data: total cases per million and total deaths per million, as well as the tests per million. And it's quite revealing in some ways what it tells us as we look at some of the results. Anyway.
Jerry, there's a lot to digest there.
Yeah, I know. I said in the beginning,
right.
I'm only showing you trends. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to show you, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff here. Here, this section here, you can see it when I sent you the when we sent you the recording. These are things that I found from sources about the country. I don't argue that each one of these things are accurate, but they're articles that I collected about what the response the country did, and these are taken from the data sources. So take it for what it is, and that is a preliminary look at differences among countries. And you can see there. But the biggest thing that I noticed was the difference between the European countries and not Chinese, but the Asian countries. Okay, so, and you can see in a larger table here that it does vary, deaths per million, significantly, I think. Not statistically, but does vary, as well as the tests per million, as well as the cases per million. So different countries have taken different strategies. And I think it's important to realize that there are a lot of different things to look at, dilemmas that countries have, like should they cut off travel or should they have travel? Do they use local beliefs about disease, or do they use the Western scientific ideas? The other thing that seemed to come out, voluntary compliance to things like lockdowns, or do they have enforced coercive enforcement? Just remember, this is just beginning to the research, okay? And just to show you an example, I also did a couple tables like this where you look at, I won't go through them all individually, but you can see there's the nation over here, and this is something that tells you a little bit about what they did. And you can see that the countries did vary. You can see that there's a very much of a variety in terms of things like testing and contact tracing. Some countries had different ways of social distancing. And the important thing that came out in there is sometimes people live in three-generation households versus nuclear households. That's a cultural factor. And as I'll let you draw whatever conclusion you want, because I'm not going to do it. Enforcement, though, I think is important. If you look at the use of social pressure in some countries on compliance, the idea of going voluntary by state and so forth, it really varies all over. If you look at the idea that coercive enforcement is important in a lot of countries and part of the culture, it's there. And then if you look at the those particular countries I was showing you, and you look at the cases per million and the deaths per million, you can just see right there in a quick snapshot of how much variation there is. That's based on existing data, that's based on existing sources, and it doesn't mean that's what it is, but you can see that it does raise some questions when you got that much of a range of what you can find of the reported data from the countries. And I think that's what I was trying to show. I don't want to, I won't go into it anymore, but I wanted to show you that what I guess the best way to explain it, I started out a month ago thinking I could come up with all kinds of things. Well, what I've come up with is a lot of questions. And you can see trends in the data. You can see that there are things that each country has done. And I think it's important that this kind of research should continue. And I think that's what we really want to say. So Fons is doing research right now with his app. I think that's one way to do it, is to collect more data there, as well as start looking at some of the potential outcomes that these different strategies have had. I think they have a lot of importance, and I think it's important that leaders of countries listen to what has happened in other countries. And I'm not too sure that's being done. And I think it's also important to distinguish between expertise, the people who are supposedly experts in it. I'm not sure if they're listening to other people as well. So all these things are important to note and important to look at. And that's all I want to leave you with, is the idea that there are some trends there that do exist. There are some trends there that we should look at, and I would encourage you to do so. And I think using Fons's 7-dimension model and using dilemmas and using reconciliation is a good way to go. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. There'll be more stuff hopefully soon.
Thank you, Jerry.
I just want to share, I know our time is dwindling very quickly, but I just want to share a couple of things. People are really wanting to see information about the app. So I'm going to put this up so that if you want, you can take a screenshot of it and, you know, take it for yourself. Also, please feel free to share this with colleagues, friends, and family. You know, the more data, the better the research, right? So, you know, if that's, please do that. That would be great. We've had so many good questions and comments. I just want to, I just had a couple that had come up. This is one that it was actually shared on social media the other day. COVID-19 is everywhere, but countries with heads of state managing the crisis better seem to have something in common. What could that be? So I think this is this in and of itself is an entire amount of research that could be done related to the COVID-19 crisis. Another thing is what effect has religion played in the COVID-19 role, right? In people's compliance and beliefs and how they should respond and react. And if any of you have any thoughts or something that you would like to share, feel free to unmute I think that, you know, we would be really happy to hear your ideas and thoughts. Another one is our comfort level and the numbers that are provided, right? Do we feel comfortable on the numbers that have been published by the World Health Organization?
Have a comment.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lorena. I'm from Mexico. I live in Chile, and I do research on cross-cultural IO-psych, and I love risk and culture.
Okay.
So, two things come to mind. In developing countries, there are several reports of underreporting of people with the disease. There are not enough tests, and also governments do not want to test. What are the thoughts of Fons regarding the stigma of disease, and how can countries lead with that? I mean, I don't think that's so much of an issue in developing countries, in developed countries versus developing, but in thinking about the theory of Mary Douglas and their book on disease, and how this is a source of shame. And it seems like the hiding of the disease, it's a thing that it's going on. Attacks on nurses and doctors around the world, it's going on right now. So how can we deal with this from a cultural perspective in the developing world?
Yeah.
That's one. And the last one has to do with how do you reconcile a worldview of consumption and control of nature with a worldview of a more feminine society that seems to be what's going on in the Netherlands? And how does this affect the way that we are going to design policies and try to help our governments?
Well, wonderful. We need another webinar to
Right.
really discuss this in depth. First of all, some first reactions. Thank you, by the way, what an excellent set of questions. The first question about statistics and, you know, shame to even talk about it is a very intriguing one. By the way, not only in developing countries, but also in developed countries, so-called developed countries, like in the Netherlands. We still don't have a clue because there are not enough test materials. There are a lot of deaths where we don't know if it was corona or not.
Right.
There are a lot of people not registered, and I'm sure that's in the Netherlands, that is in Mexico, but that will be in China. So we have to wait till the dust settles. I already heard that at the moment there are more people dying in the Netherlands for people who have chest pain and don't go to the doctor because they don't want to disturb the busyness in the hospitals. And are they corona related or not? Yeah, obviously related, but in fact it's a very indirect cause, which needs, so the statistics are blurred. There is another problem with statistics, and that is the phase we're in. You know, America has 65 out of 1 million, but you're in the beginning of the cycle. If you look at all the cycles, who knows what it will be in 2 weeks, while Italy is over the bump. So many problems with statistics. Coming to your cultural side of statistics, namely, are people open about talking about it? I would advise you to read the book of Emile Durkheim.
Right.
And it's about the statistics on suicide. And after 5 years of research, he found out that the best correlation with the number of suicides is the quality of statistics in the country where you measure it. And why? Because he gave an example. Catholic countries, very often it was the wind who pushed the man or woman from the roof, while in Sweden, the more Protestant side, it was truly a suicide. Yeah.
Right.
very complex. And by the way, I would love to invite you in a discussion that goes a bit deeper rather than my first comments on this. But it's very complex. And it's a typical scientific challenge to get the statistics right. Yeah.
Right.
I know on building on what you said is, there was a comment I saw in the chats. Yeah, you know, about following scientific laws versus doing your own thing. How can it be so low in Italy? Yeah, the only thing I can say, we had, and I just looked at it, only 53 Italians who filled in our app. And that's what they said. So I can't say more than what Italians say about Italy. What we are doing at least is to not only look ourselves, but ask people who are dealing with it in anonymity. And I hope the anonymous type of measurement does help. But not always, because if you know, my mother is French, and at the table, French people love to talk about diseases, you know, and they have buttons. While in America, if you talk about a disease, they run off the table to get another shot of whiskey. There are indeed very, very different attitudes toward talking about it or not, and very intriguing piece of research we could do there.
Right. Thank you. I'd love to.
Wonderful.
It doesn't answer all your questions, but gee, a lot to do.
Absolutely.
One question, or maybe fear that I have, is that nations will become more nationalistic as opposed to more globally minded when this pandemic is over.
Very much so. It shows everywhere.
Yeah.
And great leaders would say, fine, we have had the stage of nationalism. Look at the disasters that brought us. Let's now learn from all these local experiments, because you were nationalistic, and take it on a positive scale. But the problem, I think, let's take Europe, to have a global, there is nothing more viral than nothing more global than the virus. And we approach it nationally, that hits, and we need global approaches. And one way of doing it is to learn from each other. But it needs a leadership that is respected that can do that. And, you know, with a common enemy like the virus, you hope so. But, let the leaders stand up.
Yeah. My friend, Stephanie Schwartz, she said, I'd be interested in hearing the role of the economic variable. Minorities in the US are being criticized for not staying distant, while their living conditions don't allow for it. Iran is suffering from sanctions. Many within a country and a culture, they do not have the luxury of adhering to the rules. I think that is
just
so
say something,
true.
Kim, I want to answer that just briefly. I can tell you that healthcare and disease have been subject to differential access by different social classes, social groupings, ethnicities, and so forth forever, it seems. And the coronavirus is no exception. Certainly conditions related to specific groups do affect outcomes, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at. In what I was doing, I was looking simply at countries, and not at within a country like the U.S. I think it'd be interesting to look in the U.S. at diverse groups and states and different regions to see how the response varied there too. So it's a good question.
Very good.
An insight, if I could interject very briefly.
Sure.
Because I know we are, watching our time. I'm Wanda Kuzar. I'm the person that just got dual citizenship in Sierra Leone, and there's a lot going on over there. And I just like to share with everyone. And I will be reporting what I have on your app. And I really appreciate this research. Sierra Leone and the population don't appear to be getting along. It has a history of a lot of human rights violations. So there's some distrust of the leadership. I received a very emotional video from a media personality who is a native Sierra Leonean, but they're in the UK. And apparently they're viewing the removal of Sierra Leoneans from their homes and hotels as a violation of human rights. And the leadership in Sierra Leone is being criticized because they are not acting, except for Nigeria. The Nigerian president did speak up, asking if they could stop doing this. However, this quantitative and qualitative data that you've shared really puts things into perspective about how different cultures operate. And Sierra Leone has the least number of cases. The last I saw was that was reported to me on WhatsApp was 4 people that had died and something like 46 positive cases. So, I'm getting these daily reports. It's very disconcerting, but I really appreciate your sharing this because it really makes the perspective more insightful. Lastly, I find it interesting that the European and Asian countries are using the terminology lockdown, where here in the USA, we're calling it homestay orders. So I think sometimes the language we use is a reflection of cultural values.
That's so true. That is so true. Those were great points. Here's my, again, here's the information. I took my little test last night, and these are my final results. So please, that would just be wonderful to share that.
Can I say with the app, because we are making a new one which is a bit more intuitive. At this page, at the very top is a hamburger menu that will appeal to the American listeners. There is a hamburger menu, and click on the hamburger menu where you get much more feedback on. Because this is just the mean of all the questions, but there are separation,
right.
etc. So please don't forget the hamburger menu.
And I know we're over time. A wonderful student that I met from the Delhi School of Business in India last year, she just sent me this poem the other day. I mean, I was just blown away when she sent it to me. And she said, I'll just share the last part of it. She said, an old lady was asking for a mask of mine. A dilemma surrounded me, and I asked for some time. I made a mask and gave her on time. She left with a smile, which was deep wrinkles that shine. This was the best day of my quarantine. So her heart says everything is going to be fine. And I just really hope and pray that there will be a lot of lessons learned, and we will come out better people as a result of this. Unfortunately, we would need something like coronavirus to do this, but that is my hope and prayer. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today.
Thank you, and we will look at your chat questions separately and see if we can respond to them. And you get the slides, so hopefully we keep on contact and learn from each other. It was wonderful to be there. Thank you so much for your patience.
Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Fons.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Hi, Vincent. Hi.
Bye.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.